So, Mrs. President, 150 days of protest in a row. What are you demanding exactly? What is the people in Georgia demanding right now?
The people in Georgia are demanding basically and essentially the return of the right to have a European future. And that is what started the protests. We have had protests now for 2 years in Georgia about the first Russian law, the second Russian law, then the rigged elections that were rigged by Russian operation, sophisticated operation. But the main trigger to this massive protest was the statement of the Prime Minister saying that he was stopping the process of European integration. And that is what is unacceptable for the very large majority of the Georgians that for years have been more than 80% to support the European way of Georgia.
You spoke about a rigged election outside Georgia. For instance, in Italy, a lot of people ask what are the proofs that this election was rigged. For example, in Venezuela, the opposition led by Magdalena Corina Machado and Edmundo González had ballot observers in each ballot station, and they took pictures of the count of ballots, and so they could demonstrate in a matter of days that the election was stolen. How did your coalition do?
We have the worst than that. First of all, one must, since you talked about Venezuela, we had the same technological equipment used in Georgia as it was used in Venezuela, which is quite strange. The same company was used to introduce a new equipment of voting, electronic voting, that in fact violated confidentiality, and it was established as clearly as possible. But we are a faraway country, and it's more difficult for us to bring the proofs, because that was one type of proof, that there was no confidentiality. Mm-hmm. Those machines were transparent, and people could see you were voted for. And in a country where the pressures on people were very consistent through call centers that were established and disposed of personal information on people. Mm-hmm. So it's a whole constellation of methodology which appear little by little. So it was not something that could be observed by the observation agents on the day of the elections. Some of them were observed by our observers, but it's really gradually that you see the extent and that you have the proofs of the extent, because you can feel it the very same day. But you cannot demonstrate in the same manner. But we are much past that, because really the protests today are linked again to the 28th of November more than to the 26th of October. Mm-hmm. It is more the decision of an illegitimate government to take Georgia away from its European destiny than the rigged elections per se, where there were protests, but not of the extent that we've seen after. But the elections are a problem for something different, which is that this is very clearly the new strategy of Russia on how to conquer and dominate countries, sovereign countries, without having to resort to military interventions that are not working, that are very costly, that are very ensuring their end result, whereas manipulation of election is costless, it's easy for them, for the huge machine of what was known as the KGB, FSB. If the scenario in Georgia succeeds, and we're still fighting it and fighting its outcome, then it's easily reproduced in Romania, in Ukraine tomorrow, because that's what is expected in Ukraine to happen, to have new elections. Suddenly that becomes a main subject, and elsewhere. Nobody is immune, not even Italy, not France.
In Italy, we are already a lot infiltrated by Russian outlets, Russian propagandists, Russian agents, since
borders.
No.
Military intervention was based on the immediate neighbors that were the most vulnerable. This new strategy is much more effective in Russia's vision of the world because it can touch anywhere. And the Russian hand is not as visible as in a direct military intervention. So, in fact, when Russia intervenes in elections, you come to me and ask me the proofs. I am not a president that has at its hand secret services or any form of institution that I can ask to provide me with the proofs. Unlike, for instance, the Moldovan president that has been able, Maya Sandu has been able to prevent and counter some of the actions of Russia because she had the
Powers to do it.
powers to do it. But that is very dangerous.
Yes. Usually I like to be optimistic, but in a moment when the United States under Trump administration looks to abandon Ukraine itself in the middle of a dangerous war, what can we hope? We're not there.
We're not there.
You don't think so?
It's not only a question of thinking, it's what is happening. We have seen very concerning, say, statements from the American administration, especially for people that understand and care about what's happening in Ukraine. But I think that what we're seeing also is that the Russians have been a little bit too confident and overplaying a bit their hand. And I'm not sure that the Russians will, they have not won the military contest or the war. I'm not sure that they will win that easily the peace talks. They might get something out of peace talks more than what we thought earlier, but I'm not sure that they will win the peace talks. That's why I'm concerned about the next stage and the elections and the clear strategy of Russia that is calling for democratic election.
So what do you hope to happen for Georgia?
For Georgia, we have no, from the part of the United States, we have the continuation of the Georgian policy that we have known before. There has not been any change. We have the Nego-Bari Act that has been introduced right now in the Congress. We have the bipartisan continuation of the policy. We have the sanctions. We have very clear messages sent to the ruling parties saying that you have to change your decisions and statements if you want to reset the relations with the United States. So I would say that the concern is more on the part of the European Union stage, where we see a number of leaders that are very sensitive to the situation of Georgia and are reacting. The Czech president, Poland, the Baltic states, Macron, probably the new German chancellor. He has not had the chance, but knowing his vision of the but we have not seen a coherent expression of a European policy also.
So at this very moment, doesn't exist a strategy on sanctions against the ruling regime in Georgia like the American one? The European Union hadn't had any common action about this?
No, but that they won't, most probably they won't be able to have in the near future because of the way the decision making is done in the European Union. We know the weight of a country like Hungary, and not only Hungary, so we know there are the constraints. But where it's more preoccupying, because a number of countries have taken their own decisions on sanctions, maybe to a certain extent British sanctions are more efficient because you have to, those people have their assets in Britain, British Islands. But what is very important is, and that's for the population, for the civil society that is fighting, is to have the sense that the European Union understands what's happening, is giving it a name, and is having a policy which doesn't necessarily mean that they can tomorrow decide on sanctions. But they have to put the conditions. If you behave that way, you cannot be a member of the European Union. If you come back to normal, a little bit the same in parallel what the Megavari Act is doing for the United States. It's setting the terms of what it takes. And if you take the A road, you go in the war. If you take the B road, you come back to normal treatment. So long as they don't say that, then you're the impression from inside Georgia that the European Union is shy of having a policy, not of taking decisions, and they are hiding behind the decision-making process, but they're shying away from making full-fledged political strategy statement.
I remember that at time of Euromaidan in Kiev, European politicians were very active, going to Ukraine, supporting the popular movement, negotiating with Yanukovych for a new round of elections. Maybe after the Ukraine invasion, European politicians became more shy and don't want to afford another action like this for Georgia. What do you think about, Mrs. President?
I don't know why that's the question has to be asked to them. But again, some of the leaders are not shy at all. Macron has been addressing the refugees, the Georgian population. The Baltic states have been very active. Many parliamentarians, European parliamentarians, have been coming to Georgia. They even taking part to some of the protests. So it's not that in general you have this lack of engagement of the Europeans. What I would say, it's more a question for European institutions as such.
I have a cultural question, a spiritual question. Here in Italy, some people ask, Georgia isn't on the European continent geographically, so why do they claim to be Europeans politically? How would you answer such an answer?
Before you.
Explain that, please.
We were Christians before you were Christians, and as a state. Since the 4th century, and all the values on which Georgia has been defending Europe and European values from outside powers and pressures for centuries. That was the forefront, really, of the European Christian world. Yes, the border was in.
Yes, you fought the Mongols, you fought a lot of people coming from the east.
Anyone you want. And so they have this feeling that they are really Europeans. They don't need to be given the qualification of they're sharing exactly the same European values. And they have no alternative, because if you look around Georgia, and the same is true for Armenia, then you are in the outside world. So it's natural and no alternative exists to our European future.
Yeah.
And this question of geography has been closed once and forever by the decision to grant the candidate status, the association first, and then the candidate status by the European Union. We're no longer in a debate about geography. Even countries that were debating geography, it's fast. And that is something that is necessary for Europe. Because if Europe has the ambition of becoming a power, it cannot become that power without having its own place in the world. And the Black Sea, the Caucasus, are very important backbones for this European strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely. But about this, a last question, if you allow me. In the case of an accession of Georgia to the European Union, do you expect to be militarily covered against enemies? You have Russia on the north, Turkey on the south, Iran. So do you expect military assistance?
Yes, those are the neighbors of Europe itself. It's not just the neighbors of Georgia or of Armenia. Those are the powers with which Europe will have to measure itself, one way or the other.
And so,
So if we walk away.
No, sure, we're not. But so you expect some sharing of defense capabilities?
When time comes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure. And good luck for your struggle, and good luck for your beautiful people on the streets. And God bless you.
I'm also inviting you on the 20th of May, on the Independence Day. We were going to have a protest celebration by the civil society and the protest movement and the whole of the opposition parties. And we are inviting all the Georgian friends to come and show their solidarity with Georgia on that day.
Thank you very much. We will share the invitation. And goodbye and good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.